We'd like to welcome you all to this webinar, and we're very happy to have the opportunity to speak with our library customers directly. You use our products every day and are clearly experts in our knowledge base and discovery products. However, how they differ and how they work together. My colleagues and I come from the content side of the business, and we thought it might be interesting to share with you our thoughts about how the differences between the way the products work informs our decision-making process, our relationships with our content providers, and our interactions with our customers. So I'd like to introduce my colleagues that are joining me on this call. Madeline McKee, who supervises our Tier 1 content support team, is not able to join us today, but we'd like to acknowledge her as she played a key role in pulling this presentation together. Jess Short manages our 360 KB content team. Kathryn Cuff manages our discovery content team. I'm Valerie Mahon, and I manage our provider relations team. All of us work very closely together, and I'm happy and proud to be presenting with my colleagues. So during this presentation, we'll do a side-by-side analysis of the 360 knowledge base in Summon, and we'll discuss the metadata requirements for each product, the different acquisition methods, our approach for adding new content, and how the teams and content work together to create a cohesive experience. We will also address some frequently asked questions, and we'll allow for a Q&A at the end. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation via the WebEx Q&A feature. Scott will serve as our moderator, and will hold all questions until the end of the presentation. We'll start with the basics. What comprises the 360 KB and Summon Index content? So as you know, the primary purpose of 360 Knowledge Base is to track full text collections, or as we call them, databases, of monographs and serial content. Our goal here is to represent a database collection name that you'll recognize on your invoice, for example, Gale Academic One file. The numbers on this slide are impressive. Nearly 18,000 databases that are managed continually by more than 7,600 content providers. The purpose of the 360 Knowledge Base is to serve as a library management tool and for libraries to be able to track their collections. It isn't a patron-facing tool. We think about a database on two levels. The first level is the database level. So at the highest level, we record and maintain the name of the database and its internal code, the name of the provider and the provider-specific code, and the URL to the top level of that collection. Within that database, we track title-level metadata that includes the title of the serial or monograph publication, the ISSN or ISBN identifier, the date range of that publication that is included within the collection, the publisher, author, and editor, and finally, the URL of that title within the collection. The Summon Index, on the other hand, is a patron-facing tool. The index includes item-level records, by which we may mean journal articles, book chapters where possible, and so on. Our goal here is to deliver an end user as close to the information that he or she is searching for as possible. We do not want to send a patron to a journal title page, only need to search again to find the relevant article. And we prefer to send the end user directly to the relevant chapter rather than land on the book title and have to search deeper. The Summon Index weighs in at a whopping 3 billion items and continues to grow every day. As opposed to the knowledge base where we carefully track databases on a collection level and then at a title level within that collection, in Summon we're able to process enormous chunks of data together, and we'll use the collection level metadata in the knowledge base to inform how that data is organized into collections. Summon is able to index content beyond monograph and serial content types, and consequently includes content types such as videos, images, data sets, government documents, and conference proceedings. There are more than 100 content types available, and the corresponding facets can be used in the Summon interface to focus your search results. Summon also allows libraries to upload their local catalogs and institutional repository for a unified search experience. In our knowledge base, our content team is looking for very specific pieces of metadata that describe the top-level content that's included within a collection. In Summon, however, our needs are a little bit more flexible. Individual records could range from meeting the minimum requirement of having a title, an identifier, and a URL, or they can be as robust to include subject terms, abstracts, and full text. As we tell our providers, the more information that we are giving within a metadata record, the more discoverable that record will be. Full text is requested, but never required when considering content to be added to Summon. As previously noted, a URL is required for adding content to Summon, and we expect that the full text will be available to the end user via subscription access. We do not want a user to be greeted by a paywall after they click through from a Summon search result. So now we'll move on to our different acquisition methods. For our knowledge base, there are two primary ways that we acquire title lists. FTP delivery, either we can provide credentials to a provider, or we can use provider credentials that are given to us by that provider, or we harvest from the provider's website. Many providers will make title lists available publicly, so when available, we can pull the title list from the provider's website. In both cases, we strongly prefer KBART files. When a title list conforms to KBART standards, we know that the title list will contain exactly the information we need to create quality collections in our knowledge base. ProQuest has played an active role in developing the KBART standards, and our colleague Ben Johnson is a member of the KBART Standing Committee. As a provider relations manager, I encourage my team to talk to providers about integrating KBART standards into their title lists. When KBART files are not available, the KB team can use MARC records or other types of files, but they may need to work with the provider to ensure that all of the necessary metadata is represented. Alternatively, because we are asking providers for proprietary data for Summon, including full text in many cases, the acquisition process for Summon begins with our legal team, known as GCA, or the Global Content Alliance team. For Summon content that is associated with a new provider, a GCA team member will reach out to a targeted provider to begin the discussion around our content requirements and terms of the legal agreement. If the provider is amenable to moving forward, we'll initiate a sample review process where we're not only confirming that we will receive enough metadata to make the content discoverable, but also to ensure that the provider is able to deliver the content using an acquisition method that we support and in a file format that our tools can process. The sample review process may involve some back and forth with the provider as we endeavor to understand how the content is sold and the metadata fields are interpreted. And ultimately, the sample will be approved or in rare cases declined. Once approved, our legal team will work with the provider to finalize the terms of the agreement, and once signed, the content team will work with the provider to acquire a full back file of content that is then mapped to our schema and ingested into our index. And then we set up an automated process for processing updates. You may wonder how we evaluate potential new content for inclusion into our product. When evaluating new collections to add to our 360 knowledge base, we want to ensure that the title lists are well structured and include all of the required metadata elements. As indicated previously, KBART lists are our preference, as a good KBART file will necessarily have everything that we need to have a complete and clean title list. We want to confirm that the content that we are included is only for collections that include full text. So in a database that may mix ANI with full text content, for example, we'll only add the titles that include full text. We want to ensure that the updated title lists are consistently available either via the provider's website or FTP delivery. And we want to ensure that the data within the title list is accurate and consistent. We love our providers and want to stay in touch, so it is critical for us to have a person that we can reach out to in case we have any questions or concerns. And finally, where available, we request MARC records from our providers to assist us in normalizing titles across the knowledge base. So what we're looking at here is a snapshot of our Client Center. The provider is Gale, the collection is Academic One file, and the title is 4D International Journal of IT and Commerce. The bottom of the screen shows what the raw data looks like that we put through our ingestion engine, which maps the field to the view above, which is what you see in your Client Center management tool. In Summon, we're looking for similar things to our knowledge base. We want to know that the metadata will be clean and consistent. Occasionally, providers will change their file format, and what may seem like a minor change may require a full reload of content. If providers don't notify us about the changes, future content loads may fail, or new or changed metadata fields will not be properly represented in the index. We do have safeguards in place to track load failures, but not every change will be caught by our tools. Our provider relationships are key. The more communication we have with providers, the more likely we are to have sufficient notice of any upcoming changes, and the more prepared we are to create a seamless experience for our mutual customers. And again, we need a reliable and stable acquisition method and to be supplied with regular updates. Finally, for Summon, we require direct item-level links or a reliable syntax that we can use to create our own links to the provider platform. Again, on the bottom of the slide, you can look at raw data as it's being mapped to our Summon schema, and above is a nicely displayed record found in a Summon search result. Now, how do our KB and Summon products interact with one another? Our 360 product line offers librarians like yourselves tools to manage your electronic resources. The 360 products can stand alone, but when used with Summon, the 360 KB serves as the rights management layer of Summon. A new customer will populate the Client Center or Entota with all of the content that is available to that library. Sometimes those selections will be the entire database, and sometimes librarians will select individual titles within that database. By making those selections in the KB, the corresponding content in Summon will be activated and will now be available as potential search results in the Summon UI, keeping in mind, of course, that not all databases found in the KB will have corresponding content in Summon. As we add new content to Summon, the content will automatically be added to potential search results where a library has already subscribed to the corresponding database in KB. As you can see from this example, the book Yeast, A Problem, is noted as subscribed in the Client Center, and the corresponding record appears in the Summon search results as the fourth result following a listing of books that are within this library's physical holdings. Rights between 360 KB and Summon can be mapped in two ways, SSID, or Serial Solutions Identifier, and DBID, or Database Identifier. Our preferred method of rights mapping is at an SSID level, meaning that we are using the title level identifier to inform rights so that our clients can select which titles within a database to include, or conversely exclude, from Summon search results. This is common with collections that include A to Z lists, where clients will subscribe only to a portion of the listed titles. In cases where clients are only able to subscribe to the entire collection, we may use the database identifier to inform the mapping and make all of the records that are associated with that DBID available as potential Summon search results. So as you can see here, this library is subscribed to all of the titles in the first database, and is subscribed to 205 out of 213 titles in the African Journal Archive. The remaining 8 titles not selected will not appear in this library's Summon search results. So we've reached the Q&A part of our presentation. We've compiled 5 questions that we receive frequently, so we'll run through those questions first. Please feel free to submit your own questions by the Q&A feature, and we'll answer as many of those questions as we can. So the first question is, how are zero-title databases indexed in Summon? Certain collections that do not have identifiers or they don't meet the KB's collection criteria, so for example, video content, may be added to the KB as a zero-title database, which simply lists the name of the database provider, and the URL of the collection, rather than including specific titles within that collection. Where an agreement is in place, we're able to map that DBID to the corresponding content in Summon, noting that for all zero-title databases, rights will be applied to the entire database. There's no opportunity to select individual titles within a zero-title database because, of course, there are no titles to select. So rights with this kind of database are all or nothing. I'll ask my colleague Jess to give you some information on an exciting feature that our development team is investigating. I don't know if Jess is having some audio trouble, but I can answer for her while we're to complete the question. So the development team on at ProQuest is currently working on a project where we are hoping we're testing, in the process of testing, the possibility of adding titles to certain zero-title databases. So using video collections as an example. We will investigating the possibility of how to index those titles to be able to incorporate a title list. And once we are able to do that, we will be able to move forward with having some of those zero-title databases be available with titles and to be able to select those individual titles. So the next question, why does it take so long to add new content to the Summon Index? And for that question, I will send that over to my colleague, Kat.
Thanks, Val. As discussed previously, all Summon content requires an agreement with the provider. So conversations with providers may take months or even years for the provider to agree to terms with their legal team, for the sample content to be reviewed and approved, and for the agreement ultimately to be signed. Once signed, the provider must give us a full backfile of content, which may contain many millions of records, and the extraction process could take weeks or months. Once we receive the content, we go through several steps, including acquiring and transforming the content into standard XML, mapping the fields to the Summon schema, going through several rounds of QA and validation, and releasing the content to the next index. At any point during this process, our data team could discover a problem with the data that requires further discussion, explanation, or even a new backfile.
Okay, thanks, Kat. For the next question, this will also go back to you. Why can't individual titles be added to the Summon Index?
Great question. The Summon content acquisition process relies on automation. When we are managing more than 3 billion items, automation is an absolute requirement. Some small providers of one or a few titles do not have the resources to create and maintain an export model that is sustainable. Keep in mind also that the ingestion process that I just described is exactly the same, whether the content set includes 1 title or 1,000 titles. So we do need to balance the resource investment required to add new content against the value that the content brings to the Summon Index. That does not mean that we won't add individual titles, just that it may impact how the content is prioritized. And I just want to add one more note that we're not able to manually add those titles. So, thank you.
Okay, next question. I see this content in the 360 KB. Why isn't it in the Summon Index? So this question is really, I think, the driving force behind why we put this question together. And I think that we've gone through in pretty great detail some of the differences between the processes between the two products and have answered this question. But to summarize what we've talked about so far, the Summon content requires an agreement We require item level metadata, so much more detailed metadata and linking. And it requires an automated content delivery method. The 360 KB content does not require any agreement, is more freely available, and has fewer metadata points tracked at a higher level, for example, database or title. So we are able to move forward more quickly and in a more straightforward manner with 360 KB than we are with Summon. And for our last frequently asked question, can you add this new provider or database to the 360 KB and the Summon Index? And Jess and Kat will answer these questions.
Yeah, hey guys, sorry the audio wasn't working earlier. For 360 KB, I believe most of you know when a new content request is added, it's historically been sent through to Salesforce as a case, and we've been able to add that relatively quickly, assuming it meets our collection policy and requirements. But at this point, we're also exploring an additional way to request new content for you guys through the Ideas Exchange, which Summon is actually already doing, and I'll let Kat speak to that now.
Great, thanks, Jess. And I also want to clarify that what I'm about to say for the Summon Index applies to brand new providers, not necessarily new collections for an existing provider. So for Summon, because the process is more intensive, we need your help in choosing and prioritizing our next targets for new content. Please post your suggestions to the Idea Exchange, and feel free to vote up other suggestions that have been posted. We take the ideas seriously and do try to accommodate the requests whenever possible. In both cases, requests for corrections to existing collections should always be submitted via our support portal. Thanks, Val.
Thank you. So now it is the point of our presentation where we will accept your questions.
Okay, we've had a few questions come in. First question is, how can we determine the granularity of a database metadata only when it is in the Summon results?
Sure, yes. So there's two ways to answer that. If you're looking at the Client Center or in TOTA, and you want to see if a collection has, if it's zero title or has holdings, titles, you can go in and do that through the Client Center and select the database. For Summon, if you want to see if there's greater granularity, then yes, you will need to go into Summon and make a query and see how granular the data gets.
Okay, next question is, why is the search in Summon by DBID doesn't always work?
Yeah, another great question. That works when we're mapping rights through the database level, not necessarily the title level. So if we have rights, and I refer back to that slide that shows if you select at the title level. So if we do rights at the title level, you won't see all the search results for that particular database. So it's a matter of how we're doing rights.
Okay, the next question is, as providers move to HTTPS, will the URL eventually be changed, or do we just rely on the redirect option?
I can answer for Summon. The answer for Summon is it depends. Typically, we do need to rely on the provider to let us know or submit the changes through either updates or a new full load. If we are building the linking syntax, again, they'll just need to let us know, and we can update the link rule for that. If all else fails, then yes, we need to rely on the redirect.
Yeah, and this is Valerie.
Oh, go ahead.
I just will jump in again. This is a situation where our relationships with our providers is very important. We have many providers that we have regular meetings with or have significant communication with them. And again, the more lead time that they give us, the more opportunity we have to go ahead and make these changes before the change on their platform happens. So this is definitely a conversation that we do have and maintain with our providers.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that exactly what Val's saying. My team, the 360 KB team, relies on that strong relationship with providers to let us know when changes like that are happening so we can handle those migrations. But we also try, once we hear about those changes, we try to articulate what's happening in a Knowledge Center article that goes out to you as soon as possible so that you can also be prepared in advance.
Okay, next question. Two people have asked this question, so must be of great importance. Is there a list available to us of the content that is in the Summon Index or mapped in the Summon Index?
A fantastic question, and yes, we get this question quite a lot, and that is why both the Client Center development team and the Summon development team have worked on creating the in-index flag. So when you're in Client Center or Untitled, you can go ahead and search for a database, search for a provider, and when a list of databases appear, you can click through to see what there's a column for the Summon check mark, and you can see if it's in Summon, either a green check or a percentage, and then click through to the database details, and again through a page that will show you a percentage of the coverage for the particular database in Summon. And there's a Knowledge Center article out there that explains the process.
Okay. Question about zero-titled databases. How are they updated in Summon? For example, institutional repository that is always growing.
Yeah, great question. So I think one of the things that we were trying to point out is there are two different ingestion methods for Client Center / 360KB and Summon. So as you've correctly noted, the zero-title databases don't get up, are zero-title in 360 and don't get updated. On the Summon side, we have the regular ingestion method and process, and it all varies depending on who the institutional repository owner is, how often they update their own metadata, and then we update it on our side. Typically, it's about 1 week, 1 month, again, depending on the frequency we set up together.
Okay, next question. Give me a second here. For zero-title databases, what exactly from the database will come up in a search result? Are there results from the database?
Search result in Summon is, assuming the intention for the question. So again, whatever is mapped in Summon to that DBID in Client Center will appear. And I'm happy, if someone wants to clarify that question, I'm happy to dive further into it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Next question is, are there any improvements to open access URL checking to make sure that the content is still available?
I assume that'll be both a 360 and a Summon question. So on the Summon side, we validate as much as possible. We do not have an automated method if we're looking at individual records to determine if the links will work appropriately. When we do create link rules, we do our very best to make sure that the syntax is correct and will always drive linking. But again, it also depends on the metadata that we have and whether or not it's accurate for getting to the source. That being said, if you ever run into problems, please do open up a support portal case and we'll look into it.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Kat says for the 360 KB side. We do maintain open access databases and we try to be on top of those. But as Kat says, if you notice anything, we tend to field those questions through Salesforce cases as well.
Okay, next question is, the knowledge base shows a percentage index for mini database, but it's difficult to know what this means. Can you explain what this means? Will you provide more detailed information in the future?
Sure, I'm assuming that's regarding to the in-index checkmark. Again, there is a support portal answer, and when I go on mute, I'll go ahead and find that and post it in the chat here. So it's based on a title and identifier match. So what's happening is it's looking in Summon for a title and identifier, saying, yes, I have it, and then calculating a percentage based on that. Again, I will provide the documentation for your reading pleasure.
Okay, got a few more questions in. When looking at the Summon Index for some collections, how are full text and abstract percentages calculated? Sometimes we notice that small collections of 20 titles contains data and percentage that often exceeds what is represented.
Yeah, it's an imperfect science, and there's a quote in the article that talks about, you know, it's not a perfect calculation, so I do apologize for that. We are always submitting enhancement requests to development to iron out those calculations, but again, there are more details in that support portal article, and I will dig that up right now.
Okay. Next question is, what is the behavior to be expected when the index when the KB is not only sum in 360 and SFX?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Okay, so
Could someone clarify?
Yeah, if somebody could submit a clarification to that question, that'd be great. The next question is, what metadata checking is done to 360 KB databases to help eliminate duplicates, bad metadata, broken URLs, et cetera?
Can you repeat that, Scott?
Excuse me? You want me to repeat that question?
Yes, please.
Yep. What metadata checking is done to 360 KB databases to help eliminate duplicates, bad metadata, broken URLs, et cetera?
The KB team tries to do our due diligence. A lot of the work is manual, unfortunately. While we do have an automated ingestion process, it's not as automated as we would like it to be. So there is a lot of manual transformation and checking that happens in spreadsheets to make sure that those things aren't happening. But we do also field questions like that from our customers in Salesforce when they notice duplicates, and we are able to handle those on a case-by-case basis as well.
I just wanted to let you know I dropped the link to the documentation for the in-index flag. If you've got any further questions about it, please feel free to open up a support portal case, and I'll be happy to dive into it further, or if I need to reach out to development to get some more answers, I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay. Next question is how to check each 360 link zero title database title numbers.
I'm not sure what the question is asking. I think it's asking if the number of titles matches. Could someone follow up to clarify?
That'd be great. Please follow up with that question. The next question is, can Google Scholar find zero title database content?
I'm not sure of the answer to that one, but I'd be happy to look into it. I see this from Kathryn West. If you want to email me, Kathryn Cuff at xlibrisgroup.com, I'm happy to research the answer for you.
And Kat, I would add, I'm surprised I haven't thought about that myself, but I would be interested to know the answer to that as well. So I'd like to partner up with you on that.
Sure thing.
Okay, next question is, I don't know if you guys answered this one as the follow-up. What is the behavior to be expected with the index when the active KB is not only sum in 360 but also SFX?
Frederick, I'll reach out to you and maybe we can have a conversation about your particular question. Thank you.
Okay. That is all the questions at the moment. If anybody has any last-minute questions, please submit them. But I want to thank everybody for their time for attending today, as well as our three presenters who answered a lot of questions. And here is one more question that just came in. How to set up not showing some material type, for example, images?
Jenny, if this is for Summon Index, please open up a support portal case because the answer might vary depending on the particular content type and to the provider. I wouldn't be able to answer that generally.
Okay. If you guys want to do some concluding remarks, we don't have any other questions in, that would be fantastic.
So I'm unmuted, so I'll go ahead and take the mic for concluding remarks. I just want to thank you all for your questions. You have some fantastic questions. I just want to reiterate that I'm happy to answer any more questions that you have, either through email or through a support portal case. Our fantastic Tier 1 support staff can also answer those questions as well, or escalate them to my Tier 2 team as needed. So again, thank you all for your questions and your time.
Thank you very much.
I want to follow up.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to follow up with what Kat said. I think there's been some really interesting questions here that I would like to follow up with Scott and the rest of my panelists and reach out to you and provide more thorough answers. We also have really great articles that we're happy to share for you guys to keep. But this is a great opportunity for us, and I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you guys. Thank you.
Hi, and thanks. This is Valerie, and I'll just conclude by saying, just to reiterate, that we do have really great relationships with our providers, and we are always working on making sure that we are communicating with each other. I know many of you will reach out to providers, and we do appreciate that this is an active network of communication that's going on, and just to make sure that you all know that we are working with the providers and we are aware of the issues that you're raising with us and with them, and we really appreciate your support in making this all work together.